Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for checking out the Littrell Show, building businesses, bars, and brands. I recently had the opportunity to catch up with an old friend, Chef Dave Martin. If you can't think of the name, back in 2006, he took a chance on a new reality show called Bravo's Top Chef. Since being on the show, he has established himself as a consummate professional in the catering and events businesses, as well as consulting on some monster projects in New York, US, and worldwide. What I really enjoy about Dave's business is that he is like a chameleon. He can adapt to pretty much any situation. He has an extraordinary range of global cuisines, and that makes him in very high demand in casual and upscale dining. So I'm so pleased to have Chef Dave Martin on my show. Thank you so much, Chef Dave Martin. So tell us about your career. How'd you get started?
So, this is, technically my second career. I was in on the tech side of things before I switched to food, which would have been in 2002. I went back to school. Culinary side of things this time, and kind of pretty much a real fast track. I was doing like side gigs with Spago and events, and then kind of rolled right into an executive chef role in Manhattan Beach, California, and then landed on Top Chef, and then got moved to New York, and then, spent the last 12, 13 years there, really growing and learning and, kind of building my brand, building my company, and, working my ass off.
Yeah. I mean, building your brand is first of all, it's a big deal, but I mean, you were on, where did Top Chef come in and how did that help?
Yeah. Top Chef, that was actually from Craigslist. So, I was a recruiter. And so even when I switched to food, and I still look for all my own gigs. Like, that's just what I do. I'm always just seeing what I might find out there. But, that was just a huge platform. It was season 1. I mean, it was kind of before it was really cool, but, there was a large audience, and that kind of, it just was a big help. I was a very young cook at that point, and, just like a year and a half or so out of school. So still, kind of lame on my end, but you got to start somewhere.
Well, and that show ended up blowing up though. And being the first, being the freshman class of that show was a big deal. I mean, it's still a big deal. But
it's a huge,
But I mean, did you have to look for work so hard after that? Or, I mean, that was really good exposure.
The exposure was good. And I happened to be in New York and met some people that were opening a new place, and boom, they moved me to the city, and that exploded right after I got there because they ran out of funding. So I was like, okay, great. I've left any work behind. I'm in New York, and what am I going to do? So I actually started hustling and just making calls and calling venues where I could get in and do gigs, corporate gigs. So I started picking that up. I did some shit in the Hamptons. It was a nightmare. That story's scary, but, this was like, and then I reached out to a friend, Mark Murphy of Landmark. And I was like, dude, I'm like, you're one of the few people I know here. Like, I don't want to work in the kitchen, but can I be a server? And I worked as a server for 2 weeks at Landmark and met people that had a restaurant, and they hired me as their chef to like get them going.
Wow.
So
So
I'm kind of a hustler. Like I'm there, I got to figure it out. It was expensive, and it was very frightening, but that's kind of how I rebooted myself right after getting to the city and having everything kind of implode on me.
That is not. It's a shamefully uncommon story. Like that kind of shit happens all the time, where you like have things lined up, you have the skills, you have the opportunity, and then for whatever reason, the infinite variables that you can't control, something happens and nothing happens. Like recovering from that is a very, very difficult thing. Like, how does one do that? Like from a mental standpoint, it's got to be disappointing.
Yeah, it's disappointing, it's frightening, it's kind of every emotion you're experiencing, especially coming to a new area. I'm sure like for a couple days I freaked and called all my friends back home, and then just was like, okay, we'll get on the phone or figure something out, because you gotta generate revenue. And, I'll say that still takes place. So for anyone that's curious, like, no matter what level you get to or you're at, on the consulting side, as I'm sure, Jason, like the deal can be the best deal in the world, and you've got it signed, and, it never finishes, you never go to the finish line. So, those things still happen in my day-to-day life. And I think that's why it's important that I try to be diversified, so that I have my restaurant consulting projects, I have my events, and then I do my other stuff with commodity boards and doing consumer recipe development. So I think it's very important, as a consultant, to be diversified and not just rely on one income stream, because they all go up and down. Right, Jason? Do you
Yeah,
agree?
no doubt. I mean, my story is that one year I had 65% of my revenue came from a single client. And I was living high on the hog. I mean, I was doing really well. And then they decided to take my position in house. And so I was down to 35% of of my revenue from one month to the next. And that was devastating.
Yep.
I did not understand outreach at that point. I did not understand how to hustle up business at that point. I was just like, wow, this is great. This is going to go on for the next 40 years and then I'm going to retire.
Right.
Obviously that's like unrealistic. I understand that now. And so now I have a podcast so I can, draw attention to myself and my friends.
Right. Right.
But it's like, it's really important to like kind of constantly be, if you can't, if you're not a part of something that's relevant, then you need to create the relevance.
Correct.
And you had written a book at that point, and I think that you kind of got it way earlier on that you need to promote yourself as a brand, and you were very good at that. And it wasn't like in that smarmy way either. Like it wasn't like,
No,
hey, I'm trying to sell you stuff. It was like, hey, I'm providing value even then, and that was well before I understood the whole concept. So I mean,
yes, and I was still learning at that point too. And let me tell you how that stuff came about. Same thing. I was like, how else can I generate revenue? Okay. And I was doing big corporate events or doing food and wine festivals or whatever it might be all around the country. Right. And I was like, well, because my book was self-published, I didn't have a publisher, like you got to be really big to do all that stuff. That's a whole different game. So I was like, well, let me just do this on my own. So I ended up doing 2 books on my own, because what happened is, say I get paid whatever, 5 or 10K for the gig, I could roll cookbooks onto the whole, they'd buy the cookbooks to give to the client. Right. And so that was basically another way to make revenue off something that was, already done and published. So that's how the books came about. And then the same thing, I started my rub and sauce business, because that was also another add-on that I could do, get the big chunk of change for the dinner. And then they'd buy, the client would buy a book, a rub, a sauce, and that would go home with the guest at the event. So it would add on another 60, $80 on, per person. That was a takeaway. So that's how kind of like I rolled into books and the sauces and rubs to have another revenue stream. And then I also, with the sauces and rubs, marketed to all the box companies and all those companies that were doing the delivery boxes and some brick and mortar. So like, I kind of forget that I did all that shit too.
Yeah, yeah, and you kind of become this multi-dimensional brand where people can be like, hey, wait a second, not only is he capable of producing this dish at my event or at my restaurant or at my consulting opportunity, or for Yum Brands or Pepsi, as you've done in the past, I think, but you also can produce these products, which kind of makes you more even more marketable, in my opinion, because it means that you can create something and deliver it without a whole lot of help. I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
The book thing is, I just feel like everybody should keep a journal, because people underestimate the value of the thoughts and ideas in their heads. And when they put that down on paper, like I'm writing a book right now. When you put that down on paper, you can kind of see that possibly this could be a value for somebody else. But more so, even if you never intend to sell your book, like it's like a business card, and it's a very valuable business card. You can be like, hey, listen, I'm the author. I'm an author now.
Right.
When that happens, like you can kind of, maybe tack on a couple of digits on your consulting fee.
Well, exactly. It's about again, it's the diversification. So, going through that whole process of self-publishing, I've helped other people do that, and, whatever, taking a little bit of money just to show them the ropes. And then same thing with doing the rubs and sauces. I've learned the whole co-packer chain. So I know how to work with co-packers. So if I've got a client that wants to take a product to market, I did a couple of companies after that, one, I was doing it to help generate more revenue, right, without like being in the streets. And 2, now that turned into something that became a skill set for me of how to source and find co-packers for XYZ's, product that they want to bring to market. So, it ended up being something that I put in my toolbox in terms of, things that I could do, self-publishing, co-packing, that were just really things to help me survive, that are now, things that I can do.
Yeah, and it's a whole nother universe out there. I mean, like you can come up with a single product in your kitchen and then say, hey, make this for me, and then pay packages for me, and then ship it off to Amazon, and then they'll do your things for you based on your Shopify store. And like, there's a lot
Yeah.
of scenarios that exist that you don't even have to touch your own product. And
Yeah.
it's like a whole nother universe right now. And it's like a whole nother level of hustling that who's got it figured out is like the teenagers of America. They're like, I'm making triple digit, like 6-figure salaries every year on drop shipping. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You're a teenager.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
that. It's like that kind of hustle that I feel like we're a little slow to learn, honestly.
Right. Well, because you don't know, and so like, I just jumped in and did it, and I don't put myself on a pedestal. That was survival
I'll do
for
it.
me.
I'll put you on a pedestal.
No, but you know what I mean? So like, I forget that I've done all these things, because I just keep going and moving forward and going to the next step and learning more and doing better and all of those things. So I forget, like, having this conversation is good because it does help me realize that, yeah, like I can figure things out and make things happen, and I don't have to always rely on others. That's a very important thing, is you really have to be self-sustaining, and really it has to be up to you. Like magically jobs don't fall in my lap. Sometimes they do, but like literally right before we started this chat, I I was online looking for consulting opportunities around the country. So like that's part of my day to day. I don't have, one, there's no silver spoon, but two, it doesn't just magically all come together. Sometimes it does, but I'm still in the trenches and seeking out the next possible great client or opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about that. What's your client acquisition strategy? Like, how do you go out and
So
hustle up business?
yeah, so there's a couple things. Again, my recruiting background pays off, but one, I got referred to a guy who's like on the business side who brings me in on projects for the culinary side. So I met him, and through him, I've met some really great brand and design agencies in like in the South and also in New York. And so fortunately, I've clicked with those teams. So when they have a need for culinary, which they don't always, like, let's keep in mind, these are brand and design companies that are there to set up new fast casuals or whatever. So typically there's a chef attached to that. So I've had the good fortune that there's been a couple projects lately, or there have been a couple projects where they're like, Dave, you need a chef. And they kind of thankfully reach out to me. So I've got those things that are kind of there. But in terms of new business, I literally I've started a list, and I've already started reach outs to other companies that are like those agencies, and just saying, hey, what's up? Dave Martin, I've done these 9, 12, 15 projects, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I'm doing actually personal reach outs to other groups. Like that's something I'm doing currently, since, it's new year, just wrapped up, opened 3 concepts last year, got to get the ball rolling again this year. So that's kind of where I am personally, in 2020, is starting new reach outs. And then I'm in touch with the other groups, but it's always seems for me that it's either I have 30 things going on or like zip. So
Yeah.
when I'm zipping, that's when I get back to like grassroots and doing whatever I've got to do, and, reaching out to everyone, especially beginning of the year. I like to wait till like February, so you're not bugging people, but it's a full-time job trying to keep yourself busy.
Oh,
So
totally. Yeah. No, it's like as an independent consulting, your job is to get a job. Like it's
mhm,
not unlike politicians. Like it's like their job is to get reelected. As soon as you get elected, you have to find out what's next. And if you do a really good
yeah,
job at consulting, then you kind of work yourself out of a job.
correct, correct.
I mean, do you like what's your primary tool for that? Like, do you use email mostly, or do you use phone? Like, pick up the phone and make phone calls?
Um, the way I do it is I, go online and identify companies and such, and then I find out who the partners in are. Then I'll email them. So that's kind of what I'll do. I'll just create a list, and then um, find out who the key players are, and then go from there and do the reach outs. So it's kind of like a 3-step process.
We talked about a little bit about the kind of mental burden on an independent consultant. Like, do you have like some sort of a morning routine, or is there something that you do every day to kind of keep the regulate the mental and physical strain of the job?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very structured and I'm very organized. So I have old school paper lists, I have electronic lists, so I use all those tools, whether it's, old school or modern. So I have those things. And, I get up, I have my little bit of cold brew, my little kombucha, take my, anti stress, um, homeopathic meds,
Nice.
acupuncture, I have those things in the background. But yeah, the key is to really be organized and have a day, have a daily action plan, have a weekly action plan. Again, if you're on your own, it's one thing if you've got other people driving this, but you have to drive it. So, like, I'm very diligent in having the daily list, the weekly lists, as I said, in both paper and electronic format. And each day it's like, okay, boom, this is what I'm doing today. And I think when you look at things like marketing or reach outs, like I'm talking about doing with these new agencies, I have to be in the right mood for that and like make sure my energy's up, especially if I'm going to be physically speaking. But certain days I do certain things. So certain like Mondays maybe not a day that I'm in the mood to do that because you're putting yourself out there. So maybe Wednesdays more when so I put things in certain days based on how I am, mentally, emotionally, like where my head is at, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing. That's why, like, when I book podcasts, for instance, like I send out a link and saying, yeah, book the time that's most convenient for you with the link, and you'll notice that Mondays are not available.
Yeah.
That's when I like reserve my day for all the inflow from clients, and to put out any fires that may exist. But also, I just don't like to do shit on Mondays. I also try not
Right.
to do as much as possible on Fridays because I like long
Yeah.
weekends, and that's the kind of that's the other end of the double edged sword of being a consultant, is that you have a lot of freedom to create your own schedule. I'm like you.
Correct.
I very much like a good amount of structure. And so I keep just
Yeah.
massive checklists,
Hmm.
checklists that I will
Hmm.
never, ever get through. And then just try
Yeah.
to kind of work on things as I find them convenient, and I find myself mentally available to work on.
Right. Or as they're prioritized. Like, I've got a big event in August, so I have things lined up for it and I'm getting all the paperwork and things in order, but it's like it's not until August, but I've already got 50% of what I need to do done now and I'll have it all done next month. So I think that's important too, is when that is in terms of if it's a physical event or something, but the actual timing of when you need to have everything in place, but always in advance.
Okay, that's crazy. Okay, so you're talking about events in August. We're recording this on February 11th, by the way. So Dave is organizing things for August right now. I'm trying to master today, like later today, like as soon as we hang up.
Stop. No, but you know what I mean? You kind of like, you have to like, for me, just because of my OCD and ADD and all that stuff, like I'm just always anxious about stuff. So if I can get everything done like way in advance, like I love to do that when I have that opportunity.
Yeah. Do you also give yourself time to like not do that? I mean, do you? 'Cause, I mean, there's OCD and then there's intensity. I feel like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it actually is OCD, but like I feel like it's probably intensity, and you put a lot of intensity into your work, and I think that that's very important, and I think that that's totally different. I'm very
Yeah.
similar. Like obviously I use systems like Trello and like Slack to communicate with my teams and to make sure that things are
Yes.
done in priority order.
Uh-huh.
But once I'm done, I'm done. And like once I put it down for the day, it's down for the day most of the time. I mean, at least I
Yes.
think. I mean, I can't turn off my brain, obviously, but like I'll close my computer and be like, I'm done for the day.
Oh, definitely. I'm definitely, and that's the best part of, running your own companies and businesses, which I've done for 25 years now. Like, that's why I can never really go back. I like having the flexibility. So when it isn't crazy, I like when it's not crazy, but when it's crazy, I'm down. Like I can go, whatever, 14 days in a row, whatever the situation requires. But I'm trying to learn to be better. So when I do have downtime, to really kind of embrace that.
So 25 years is a really long time. Have you ever thought about hanging up your knives and getting some cushy corporate gig and just retiring?
No, no, I can't retire. I got too much more money to make. So, yeah, no corporate gig. I mean, unless it was like, oh yeah, we're going to pay you a couple million a year, but otherwise, I just can't. I mean, I'd rather work at Trader Joe's. Like, I can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
not ready. Definitely not ready. I have a lot more to do, and I'm still trying to figure out what that is. But I know, you know, again, I like the diversity of the consulting and the events because it's kind of like right brain, left brain.
Hmm.
And I get satisfaction from both in different ways. The consulting clients are normally, at least events, I can do the event, do the dinner, do the, whatever it is, corporate cooking class. And then like I get all the accolades of everyone loving it. Like that's a more an immediate reward. The consulting is maybe more on the financial at the end of by the end of the project,
Hmm.
if that makes, do you agree?
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, some of them are better than others. Like corporate clients are always good, typically,
Yeah.
and lucrative. But then you
Yeah.
get these kind of nickel and dime things that you're really into that they don't necessarily. It's like off Broadway or off Broadway gigs that you're just like, it's
Right,
not as
right,
much
right,
money,
right.
but I'm really into it. And then there's
Yeah,
like what I really like is the event jobs because it reminds me
yeah,
of when I was a shift bartender, and it was just like, okay, you go and you work your job, and then you take your money, clean your bar, and then you walk away, and then you forget about it forever.
yes, 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 yes. That's what I like about that's a great way to put it, and that's what I enjoy about that is that you have the lead up and the build up, and then you're done, and it's awesome. I love that closure.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I mean, so it doesn't always work out like that. Obviously, sometimes things linger. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. But I mean, the things that you've been working on, as far as like these big dining parks. I remember you turned me on this thing last year, and
Yeah,
it was a big project. I mean, we're talking about 10,000 covers a day, something like that. It was a big fast casual operation with multiple outlets in the same park, and it was kind of built into some sort of residential thing, if I remember right.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and that is kind of what we're going to start seeing a lot more of, it seems like, because that's not the
yeah,
first thing. That's not the only thing like in that similar vein that's come across my desk. And like, I have a couple pitches in for something like that right now. And it seems to be like that's a much safer bet for developers,
yes,
for landowners,
yes,
and for consumers as well. I mean, it seems to be like consolidating fast casual rather than doing these mega dining outlets is kind of
yes.
what we're going to see in the future. And in your opinion, what is the future of dining in the gig and convenience economies?
Yeah, 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 definitely those, because retail is out, right? Retail is dying. I've got a couple buddies that are specifically in commercial real estate, and that's what they do is they buy and sell those large scale properties. And, um, you know, that's the dinosaur, not just because of Amazon, but other people do things online and there's just the convenience that's available. So the entertainment and food based concepts, which is what we're talking about, those are extremely popular because you know, great for young families, great for, millennials, do enjoy, they don't want to tip, they love to be able to, and I'm not putting them all, but that is the category that everyone's appealing to because
Hmm.
they've got the most spendable dough right now. So that's why I'm addressing that,
Yeah. Hey.
pool of people. I mean, it's all good. Like, millennial, that's great. Embrace it, be a millennial. I don't care. But, they enjoy that fast casual. I love it. That's why fast casual is definitely one of the trends. And then when you tie that into the entertainment based market or related, that's what's happening. Well, there's a couple reasons too, especially with the fast casual and the multiple food outlets in that one space. There's smaller spaces typically. You don't have the overhead with labor. There's so many different factors that come into play. And obviously money is one of the biggest ones. And one of the biggest reasons places fail or close is because rent and space and staffing and there's so many things that make it collapse aside from poor management.
Yeah. Poor
But
management and undercapitalization, I would say, are probably the top two reasons bars are always going to
correct,
fail.
correct, exactly, and then a whole subset of like 100 other things. But the definitely that's happening. Fast casual. And there's a couple categories of fast casual that there's like the super fast casual that has no booze and stuff like that. Then you have, kind of the upscale fast casual where, they may bring it to your table. There's like a bar component that's tied into that, right? Jason, I'm sure you're seeing
And
there's kind of the couple.
like
Yeah.
QSRs and fast casuals are kind of starting to merge a little bit. Like you see this where like Starbucks is
Yes.
starting to serve liquor now, and
Correct.
Chipotle is starting to serve beer, and like they're kind of starting to
Yeah,
merge a little bit.
Taco Bell Cantina, so you're seeing the convergence of the two, and then that way it can appeal to those other consumers because I'm although I work on a lot of fast casual and related concepts, like that's not where I dine. Like
Right.
I like a server, like I don't want to like carry a number. Like that's just not my thing. Cause one, I do it for a living. So like I do enough that at home and for my friends and family that when I go out, I want to have a server. Like I want to be served. I'm not carrying my fucking tray,
Hmm.
so um, I'm a different demographic, but part of it is because of my career. So I want a real experience, not fancy, just I want it to be good, but I want someone to take my order.
Well, and that expectation is right out there in front, and you're willing to pay for it. You're willing to pay gratuity, and blah 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 blah. Yeah,
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
In the context of where you see QSR and fast casual
Yeah,
going,
yeah.
and I was going to ask you about your strange ability to adapt to any global cuisine ever. Like, what do you think about in-home experiences?
Yeah, so there's two things. So on that, in I want to throw one other thing on the QSR fast casual. I think what you're seeing now, and this is a trend based, right? If you're noticing, which I know you are, but whoever, if you're there listening, look out there. There's so many other things that are coming. It's not just burgers and pizza. Like, that's blown and it's still growing. I don't know how, but
It's
you've got
safe. Burgers and pizzas
you've
are
got
safe.
oh, totally, totally. But you've got Indian, you've got all these other, because we've run out of stuff, right? We've run out of the norm. So there are definitely a lot more global flavors coming into play, and that's one of the things you'll see in those concepts, like Mediterranean, Greek, like those are really taking off. There's a couple brands that are just like growing by gangbusters in that category. So definitely, and I think part of all these food shows and all this shit that's out there, like everyone's seems to be a little more educated or into food. So that's why it's allowing those opportunities for different types of cuisine to enter into the market and explore the profitability. So I think that's something we're seeing, and going to continue to see more of. And that ties into the second part of what you were talking to me about, which is, I mean, look what I did last year. I did an Indian fast casual that was in Manhattan, and then I did a Georgian, and not, it's not chicken and waffles from Atlanta. That's like Russian Georgian. And then most recently an Indonesian Malaysian concept. So, like, and the Georgian restaurant is more of a restaurant, but the other two are they're totally on the fast casual side. So, there are definitely opportunities there. Now, here's the deal. One, there's an opportunity, but we have to, do these work. And that's really the next thing that we need to kind of see. I know the Greek and Mediterranean really seems to be working, but I don't know how Indian and some of these others. And like I've seen a lot of, there's another brand that has like 12 locations now. It's like a kebab style joint, which I guess still ties into that Mediterranean and Middle Eastern. But I think those are doing well. I just don't know the Indian and things like that. Like, are people ready for that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like even people are starting to take even a little bit more risk in niching down in, national brands like, North Indian versus South Indian,
Mm-hmm.
chicken waffle
Correct,
chick is
correct.
like was just got a huge got some huge VC dollars pumped into her. Like
Yeah.
there's into that business. I mean, like that's, as long as it's not a single restaurant where a single person is the proprietor, it seems like there's still money going out to concepts that are, as long as they're, the numbers work.
Yes, yes, there are definitely that, and then there's a lot of just like independents that have some dough and want to try it, and so it's. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a litmus test. You don't really know, and it'll be interesting to see how these concepts. They're all still open right now. Well, one just opened this week, so I'm hopeful they're still open. But it's just there's just so many factors that it takes to be successful in the food game, and especially when you're exploring a new concept or not the traditional aka burgers and pizzas. But that's in answering the other question. I'm super stoked that I've been able to land these. Well, for example, the Indian client was Indian, the Georgian client was Georgian. So the fact that I was able to get in and have them meet me and have them trust me with preparing the food of their childhood or their culture or background has been really awesome, because I love that. I mean, I feel like I'm French trained and all that, and I'm very well traveled, so that obviously helps. And I like to try different types of cuisine, but I really love that opportunity and challenge to create food from whatever region. And I kind of really do a deep dive into it. And I really try to keep it true to the origin in terms of ingredients and, really make it real.
Yeah, I mean, how much of it do you think is like your ability to reproduce traditional dishes from a country that you've never lived in, versus how much you're able to be a wise business decision because you have experience and you're reliable and you know what you're doing on the business sense. Like you can cost out a dish and say, this is how this fits into your overall business plan.
Right. So keeping those two in sync, the true dish and the pricing. Is that the question?
Yeah. I mean, like it's like
Yeah.
when if you have an Indian client who's coming to you, this guy from Southern California,
Right.
and saying, "Can you reproduce an Indian dish?" When there are other consulting chefs from India out there, I'm presuming it's a country of 1 billion people. I'm guessing they have their own chefs there too. Why would they pick you over somebody like that?
Yeah, same. And and that was the case in all of these 3 most recent concepts. It's all, they're from that region, and that was the big thing. And again, these agencies or the consultants that referred me, I was just able to be like, hey guys, like luckily I've had some experience, but I guess they trust me. And once they've met me, like before, and they're like, well, the guy's not Indian, or the guy's not Georgian. And it's like, well, just meet him. And so kind of, I guess I'm good in person. And then they end up trusting me. And then, because I listen to them because typically with these aren't like big conglomerates. These are like small, 1 or 2 investor type size projects. So, I listen to them and it's like, well, you guys, you have this concept idea. I'm sure there are dishes that you want to have, and I have them talk about that, but I always kind of go in knowing some of the signature dishes from the region so I can just like immediately start talking about it. And then from there go and reproduce it. Like with the Georgian concept, I went to Georgia for 3 or 4 days, which was, it's great if you love chain smoking, but,
I mean, I'm just picturing a lot of briny food and vodka. I mean, I don't know anything about Georgian food.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very heavy, because again, it's regionally based, the temperature and the weather, but a lot of cigarettes. But it was cool. That was a great immersion, which you get to really. We saw all the different facets. We saw the mom and pop places. We went to a higher end place in a museum. They did a day where all their friends and family brought dishes over, so that was a really great immersion for me to really kind of see and taste and, understand where they were coming from in terms of the food side of things. So that was really great. And then when I do the other concepts like Indian and such, again, they have a little inspiration, and then I'll have them I'll go to their favorite places with them to kind of understand where the direction is. So that's kind of I'm just kind of sharing how the process works typically. And even when, or if it's a Mexican concept, like, I mean, I can do that with my eyes closed, but, things like that are super easy. But, anytime I go to do one, like I was working on another one, and some of these never go to the end. They get halfway through and they're like, oh, we're not going to do this. I'm like, okay, great. But even if I was doing like an American, like comfort food one, even in that, even though that is totally like, boom, like no brainer for me, we still spend the time to take the client and go check out a lot of other concepts and kind of see what they like and make sure that in terms of not just the branding, but in terms of the food and how we're going to put it all together. That's kind of what we do as a team to ensure that we're kind of staying on track. And then I guess I'm just sharing more about kind of how the process works for people that don't know. We start at point A and then we go through this whole process, the immersion, we do the tastings and then do the menu selections and then, get further into that costing and, doing suppliers and training. But that's kind of part of the process in any concept, which is, I enjoy that. The immersion is kind of my favorite part because it keeps me on top of things to see what's happening out there. But
I mean, the life cycle of like onboarding a client. I mean, even despite all that vetting that you do, where you say, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking. These are the dishes that I want to prepare for you." You actually prepare the dishes for them. They taste them. They say, "Okay, this is great," and then you move on. And then occasionally, sometimes the whole process stalls, right? I mean, so you have to, like you still have to maintain a reasonable level of dispassion about the whole thing because you don't know if it could move forward or not, right? Until the check clears.
Yes, Exactly. Yes, exactly. And that's really important too. If this, if that's our audience we're talking to, it's all about contracts. Like when I first moved to New York, I got burned several times to the tune of thousands of dollars. And so that was when it really got me to tighten up contracts, proposals, all of those things, getting money up front, other milestones where you collect additional funds, separate contracts for, other components. Like now my training is a separate component in case, again, as I talked about, like there were 3 or 4 concepts I did within the last 2 years, including that one I tried to bring you in on, Jason, that
Star one.
they totally dropped the whole ball. They canceled the design agency and all the architecture stuff, and they were already in a couple $100,000 there. And then I had done like a tasting and we kind of had the menu lined out. I mean, I got that first part, but then they just were like, keep it, which is how it is in my contract. But like, once the money's in my pocket, you're not getting money back because they may not take it to fruition. And I have literally 4 projects like that we did tastings, they were already like, in the architectural phase, brand and design. And then who knows why they just decide not to do it. So that's something that everyone needs to be very leery about, no matter how well funded or how amazing and perfect everything seems. You may not make it to the finish line. So that's something that the last 4 or 5 years, as I've delved more into these types of projects, I've learned that, great, you can put that whatever X dollars on your AR, but you may only see part of that.
Yeah,
right?
It's not push like saying, "Hey, this is my number," and saying I need a deposit on this before I start working is not pushy. It's professional. It's what all the other trades do. Like you say, this is what I cost. This is my number. If you want to negotiate, maybe we can negotiate. Okay, fine.
Right.
But once you sign this contract, then it comes with another piece of paper. Yeah. And that's not, a lot of times people have a hard time asking for that because they think that they're being pushy or they think that they're being, unprofessional. But, it is the professional move to say, like, once you have an agreement, you put it down on a piece of paper. I'd like to do it in the form of either a short proposal, which looks a lot like an invoice. And then I send it. And then once I get the deposit, then we start getting to work. But, thank yous do not pay the bills. My landlord does not take gratitude. So it's like, you need to get a deposit for this stuff and it's totally okay.
Yeah. So definitely proposal, contract, scope of work, everything clearly spelled out. And then what those milestones are in terms of payment, which I think I used to have like 50, now it's like 50, 25, 25. Like I'm not messing around because I want whatever work I've done to that point, I want to be compensated for and not, have it flop or something like that. And the monies that I lost years ago they just weren't like this. There were just, maybe some more Mickey Mouse people that, you trusted them, New York.
New York. New York is kind of the worst.
Yeah, it is the worst. So, I learned early on in the first couple of years. And then from there, that's just something that's very important, is to have a solid proposal that outlines what you're doing and what your role is, along with your comp plan and how you're being paid and, when and where that's taking place.
Yeah, a lot of this falls in line with phase planning. So if you're like, okay, and I like to get paid for the pitching process. So if I spend a lot of money and time into like investing into a like multi-page proposal that articulates exactly what I'm going to be doing, then I typically bill for that in the form of like onboarding, or like I bill for that time. And it's a risk because sometimes you don't get the job. And so like it's, it could work out one way or the other, but it's like I use Wave. A lot of people use QuickBooks, or a lot of people use FreshBooks, especially as like a solo independent business. What do you use?
QuickBooks. I'm QuickBooks.
QuickBooks. Does that tie into all your tax stuff? And do you do your own taxes, or
everything's integrated? Yeah, everything's integrated. Most of my payments are all electronic at this point, so I don't really, checks, I don't really get those. And I prefer the money just rolling into the bank.
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, I don't want it if I don't have to touch cash, I don't touch it at all. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
With credit card fees, I charge 3.5% for credit cards if you want to use a credit card, but I still take
a credit card. Guess what? You're paying the fee.
Somebody's paying the fee. Has anybody recently ever tried to like lowball you? as far as like your fees or anything?
Oh my gosh, everyone wants to lowball.
It sucks because somebody's like, because like especially when it's slow, you're like, oh well,
Yes,
maybe I'll
yes.
do it this one time because I need the cash flow right now and blah blah blah. But then like it ends up biting you in the
Yeah,
ass because those clients tend to be the fussiest.
they're the nightmare. Yeah, I mean, I officially just had the worst client I've ever had in 25 years of business, but that's a separate story. But
No.
you've got to, they're the worst. But you've got to make sure that you're going to be happy with it in terms of the money. So, of course, negotiation and go in. It's the standard for any business. Kind of go in. Well, go in with your ideal, but knowing that there is room to take that back a bit. But I mean, let's say I'm just going to use round numbers. Like let's say whatever, it's a small project. You want 25K, and so you ask maybe for 28. And then they come in at 22, it's like, can you get them closer to the 25, which is what you really wanted? So there is kind of typically that kind of play, but
Yeah.
I try to just be, here's something, again, this is from me being a recruiter. One of the things, it's the same as like, when you're negotiating a salary, right? You want to ask what their budget is. So that's something that I always ask, whether it's a consulting client or an event client or a recipe client, what's your budget?
Yeah.
Because here's the deal. Everyone always has a budget. Okay. So and it pisses me off because I'll ask, and this is like on the event side, it's like, oh, well, we wanted to spend, 200 a person or whatever. It's like, or what they're like, well, we really didn't have a budget. And it's like, okay, well, dinner for 10 is 10 grand. Oh, well, we want to spend that much. It's like, well, bitch, what's your budget?
And
Everyone has a budget.
you definitely know what you don't want. Okay. That's
Exactly,
a bumper.
exactly. So if someone's like, well, we don't really have a budget, then just throw out an astronomical figure and they'll be like, oh, we didn't want to pay that much. It's like, well, then what is your target? Like, give me that, because when I do a proposal and I put the price out, I want to know what's going to come in. So like typically if I'm with these agencies, I'll be like, what are you guys thinking? You already know what, they're already being paid, right? So they already know what the client's going to want to roll out. It's like, well, oh, they're trying to target this. Great. Then I'm going to come in that range because I don't like to dick around. I just want to come in and get the deal, but I want it to be at the rate that I need to make it worth my while.
Definitely an important investment in your brand as well, saying no sometimes.
Yes. Well, that's why I moved from New York to San Diego. So now I can say no, because actually on this last project, we didn't have the training component signed or deposits or whatever. And they were hemming and hawing. And I was just like, you know what? Suck it. I'm like, I'm done. You guys figure it out. I don't want to deal with you anymore. And, if I was still in New York, that little bit of change left on the table, I would not have been able to not do. So that was my first, I've just been back in California for like 6 months. So it is nice to be able to say no. And if your gut is telling you that it's a red flag, then you need to trust your gut because it's a red flag. If it's a red flag in the beginning, get ready till you get to the end when all the money is being spent and stuff. It becomes, a bigger red flag, like a nightmare.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure we could just go on that for a long time.
We won't even go there. We're keeping this positive and light and giving, the tips.
1000%. 1000%. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Chef Dave Martin. It has been such a pleasure catching up with you and talking about your war stories. And, is there anything, how would we find you on social media?
I'm Chef Dave Martin on all platforms.
Nice. An early adopter.
Yes, exactly. For sure. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Well, that wraps up my interview with Chef Dave Martin. What I really appreciate about the chef is his candid, open nature about talking about the back end of the business that nobody ever really sees. So thank you, Chef, for being so open and honest about the realities of being an independent consultant in the F&B world. It's not always fun. It's not always pretty. It doesn't always pay. And sometimes it doesn't always work out, even if you are on the level that Chef Dave is. To find Dave Martin, check out his website, chefdavemartin.com, or on all social media platforms at Chef Dave Martin. I hope you enjoyed this episode about being an independent consulting chef. Be sure to check out the show notes for a brief summary of the show and links to anything that we talked about. I like to keep the shows as short and dense as possible, but you know what? I felt everything in this episode was important, so I pretty much kept it all. If you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas, please be sure to reach out to me at Jason Littrell on Twitter and Instagram, or search for Jason Littrell on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm quite active on all of them, including TikTok. It's hilarious. If you got anything out of our time together, you can thank me by simply sharing this with another person. Just text or email or share it on your social media, whatever. If you love the show, please hit the subscribe button or leave a comment on Stitcher, iTunes, Google, Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. The ratings and reviews are oddly a big deal, and that helps me get in front of new people. So thank you so much. I hope to see you next time on The Littrell Show.